Hello, good evening.
Hello.
My name is Georgia Court, and I'm the proprietor at Bookstore One, Sarasota. And it's so lovely to see all of you this evening. Some familiar faces, some faces not familiar at all. And I think we're going to have a lovely evening. Just a couple of pieces of business, and that is I have put in the chat a link that you can click to purchase Herbert Martin's book from Bookstore One. And it's at the very top. It's the first entry, and I'll put it in a little bit later during the presentation, so you don't have to scroll down so much to find it. If you decide halfway through, wow, you really need to have that book, and I bet you are going to really want to have that book. Also, I have set this up so that as you come in, you are muted. But I have set it so that you can unmute yourselves. I would ask that you stay muted unless you feel like you want to have a dialogue with our speaker. And I understand that Herbert is open to conversation as the presentation goes along, as it seems appropriate. And we will also have Q&A. And if you would rather put your Q&A or your questions in chat, please go ahead and just put them in chat, and we will get to them then at the end of the presentation. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Herbert Woodward Martin is a prize-winning poet and performer, an actor and playwright, a singer and opera librettist. He's a professor and a scholar. He's professor emeritus and poet in residence at the University of Dayton. His work has appeared in many well-known publications, as well as a number of anthologies. He has authored 11 books of poetry, including The Shape of Regret, his newest, which is this book. That's the one, there's a link to purchase, and that's the latest out, I believe. He's regarded as one of the leading scholars of 19th century African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, and has published extensively on the subject, as well as touring and performing the poetry of Dunbar all over the country. He's been part of a number of festivals, videos, and performances dedicated to the poet, including writing the libretto for an opera based on Dunbar's work. In 1999, Mr. Martin was awarded the Mellon Poetry Prize for his epic poem, Log of the Vigilante. And in 2002, he was the recipient of the Ohio Governor's Award. He was also named Dayton's Poet Laureate. And in 2002, he won the Mark Twain Award from the Society for Midwestern Literature. He has been awarded 4 honorary doctoral degrees for his scholarly work. And in 2004, Kent State University Press published his biography, Herbert Woodward Martin and the African American Tradition in Poetry, which was authored by his longtime friend, Ronald Primow. And by the way, it was Mr. Primow who brought Mr. Martin to my attention, and I'm so glad that he did. Herbert Martin's poems have been set to music by numerous American composers, and he recently was commissioned to write a libretto by the Harlem Chamber Players. So please welcome Herbert Woodward Martin. Enjoy yourselves. I will kind of disappear, but I'll be here if you need me.
Thank you all for coming. And I was a little bit askance because at first I thought nobody will come to this reading. But the Lord says, where there are 1 or 2 gathered in my name, there I am also. And so I thank you all for honoring me. And I think that introduction promises just a little bit too much because as you know, as singers get older and older, they are less likely to come on stage to sing anymore because I guess they don't practice enough. And 2, the voice begins to age a little bit and probably disappear because of breath control. But nevertheless, we'll labor on and see what happens. It's nice to see. I'm going to peek down to see this name, Mr. Maluk. Is that right? Okay, I see. There's a Biden Harris sign behind him, and that caught my attention because I was going to read you the latest little poem. Doesn't make any sense to anybody unless you're Black, I think. But after the political election, we feel as if we have been beaten to death with a trick stick that's a walking stick. We shall have to continue to struggle with the circumstances until Zora Jones's goat dies. And I think Black people would laugh because they're always waiting for Zora Jones's goat to die, among other things, as one moves along. But I think probably there's a better poem somewhere along the way. I can remember, if you remember that photograph that you saw when you came in, can you all hear me? Shake your heads. Okay, because somebody said I wasn't talking loud enough. So if you saw that photograph when you came in, clearly I was younger. Now my forehead is stretching all the way back to the middle of my head. So I am getting a little bit older, as one might say. But early on, let me remember, 1970 or 71, I bumped into Alan Tate. And being a young poet, I read only my stuff. And he said to me rather instructively, one has to have an old guy in your repertoire when you go on a reading tour. And I really didn't quite understand what he meant by that until the next year when I heard Margaret Walker read Dunbar. And she read him so well that I decided that's got to be my old guy. And from that point on, from 72 to this day, Dunbar has been my old guy. And I thought I would start out with a little poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. It's called A Negro Love Song. I seen my lady home last night. Jump back, honey, jump back. I held the hand and I squeezed it tight. Jump back, honey, jump back. I heard a sigh, a little sigh. I seen a light gleam from her eye and a smile go flitting by. Hey, jump back, honey, jump back. I heard the wind blow through the pines. Jump back, honey, jump back. The mockingbird was a singing fine. Jump back, honey, jump back. And my heart was beating so when I reached my lady's door that I couldn't bear to go. Jump back, honey, jump back. I put my arm around her waist. Oh, jump back, honey, jump back. I raised her lips and took a taste. Jump back, honey, jump back. I love me, honey, love me true. Love me well as I love you. And she answered, 'cause I do. Jump back, honey, jump back. I met her in Venezuela with a basket on her head. If she loved others, she didn't say, but I knew that she'd do to pass away, to pass away the time in Venezuela, to pass away the time in Venezuela. And that's my nod to Alan Tate, who was one of the fugitives. And it didn't mean that he'd done anything wrong. It simply means that he and John Crow Ransom were called fugitives. And I think it was simply a way in which they wrote more than anything else. And we, I dare say it's coming to me, we remember Allen Tate because of his ode to the Confederate fighters in the Civil War. And that poem lasted until sometime in the middle of the 20th century when Robert Lowell wrote a companion piece. It was it was an ode to the Union fighters. So then we have these two back-to-back poems by two really important American poets. I'm going to sneak back to my 10th volume, and it changes because the voice in the poem is different from me. He was a white student in my class that suddenly disappeared, and I didn't know why. The poem, I think, explains something of how and why he disappears. It's called On the Flyleaf of the Silent Singers, and I'll explain that on the flyleaf in a minute. Work arrives. He carries a gun loaded with point-blank metaphors, demands the best young man in the class, takes him away at gunpoint. I am unable to restrain them with music. There were seeds in that mail whose roots were ready to grow into harbored and labored gardens. Now he has been missing for weeks. In bars and mountains, he digs with his hands nightly and daily for the personification of money, the seduction of feminine allure. He has not learned yet how to keep the wolves from eating his heart. The reason why I know that he went, as many young men do, to the mines is because the students had more information about this young man than I do. He disappeared, I think maybe a quarter of the way into the semester, and he never came back. And that, for some reason, you know, when you lose the very best that you think you're going to get in any one semester, that becomes part of a troubling itch, I suppose. And there's no way to relieve it except that you hope that the person wanders into somebody else who knew how talented he was and would take him under their wings and make him into a really decent poet. So I am going to switch to the Shape of Regret. One of the things that I don't really remember is how I came to that title, The Shape of Regret. So, but if you ask me, I will find an answer. This is called An English Street Vendor. Edith Sitwell, does she sit well with her classical well-trained mind? Yes, Dame Sitwell, quite well, sits well on her pinnacle far from hell. Here she nourishes and she flourishes with her cry, good poems to sell. One of the things that I found about Edith Sitwell was that she was really a remarkable poet and ultimately became a dame of the empire for all of her work. And she wrote a series of poems with the English composer whose name just wandered out the room and will not come back. And they wrote this poem, and I think that she really was maybe one of the first of what we call now rappers. You'd have to listen to that facade to understand what it is that she does that makes her that. But The story is told that each morning she got up and took a walk, and of course she met the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas along the way, and he would say, "Good morning, Dame Edith," and she would say, "Good morning, Mr. Thomas." Somebody, fortunately for Dylan Thomas, offered him an honorary degree, and he said, "Yes, I will take it." And somebody said, "Well, why are you so anxious to get one?" And he says, "Because now when I take a walk and I meet Dame Edith Sidwell along the walkway, she will have to say, 'Good morning, Dr. Thomas.' And I will say, 'Good morning, Dame Edith.'" These are really strange jokes, so I will curb myself and not tell anymore. What you will find most often, I think, in The Shape of Regret is that when I was also young, I used to go right up to the door of any poet that I thought would open the door and let me in. And so I had a nice kind of meeting with many, many poets. And some I wrote letters to, as with William Carlos Williams. And this is a poem called Dear Bill, after William Carlos Williams. This is just to say that Hurricane Ike denuded the oak and white birch trees that stood on both sides of our house. The bark and leaves and limbs decapitated, blossoms laid waste on the city's best piece of landscape, which forced me to abandon all the foods I had hoarded for the future. In all of the items I had saved, there was not one single piece of fresh fruit, and certainly no plums. That's a reference to one of William Carlos Williams's poems, This Is Just to Say, and he wrote this little poem for his wife, and it ends with, "There were no plums." I got a question from my granddaughter. I don't think it refers, but she was the first one. And she asked me what was lightning. And I thought that I would try and answer her in the same way that Walt Whitman answers that question. "What is lightning?" my granddaughter asked. "I do not know," is what I tell her. "Is it a tributary, a river falling from the sky? Is it the finger of God listening to the fears of the flesh? What are acts of insubordination? Are they the opening of the gates of choice? Has the heart always been innocent? Yes, it has always been a seeker of resonance, just as one generation departs from another. Such an act is not a dismissive handshake. It is not a handkerchief to blow one's nose upon, nor a thread to wipe away perspiration. These are my observations, granddaughter. Once, a long time ago in Las Vegas, I met Lucille Clifton, and her very famous poem, picked up by a lot of people, is Homage to My Hips. And so on reading Lucille Clifton's Homage to My Hips, I am here to praise ungainly women, the ones with large pork chop hips that sway with the motions of the earth, with the intrigue of wind and shadows alternately moving and bending with the leaves on the vines, and subsequently to tickle the hip bone, which maintains that heavy abundance which allows women to dance on the arms of the sun, or to swing so low that they hear the earth cry out, choose me, pick me up, take me home. My mother had similar hips. They beckoned when she encountered men of her choosing. Their eyes appreciate what they saw. All men of color say they must pay strict attention when they receive such personal invitations. Well, my mother's long gone. She never heard this. And if she did, she would deny that she was in this function. So there you are. Uh, I have a huge cup of not iced tea. Thank you, Mr. Zim. I see all of you doing interesting things, either smiling or snapping your fingers. So I hope that you'll go off and pick up some of these people that I'm mentioning, because most of them, somewhere along the way, if no more than through my reading of them, have inspired me to be better and to insist that I go back and rewrite something. And that I think is what most poets do. They read a lot. If you don't read a lot, you never know what has already been done. And since I know what's already been done, that keeps me from reinventing, say, the sonnet or something that's fairly easy, like the haiku. Though I would dare say, for me, it's still been what, 5, 7, 5, and to pick the most unusual word that I can find to pluck into one of those 3 lines is really difficult. There's no other way for me to say it. I'm sure there's other ways that other people can say it. There are 3 other poems after Lucille Clifton, and I think the next one makes a little fun of my family. 3 poems after Lucille Clifton. At the drop of a hat, stop and ask for directions. My reticent family pretends to be too shy to ask, too embarrassed to inquire. I forge ahead because I know that there are dangers up ahead that veer into nothing. I also know that there are strangers up ahead who possess answers. Once, when we were lost in Western Hungary, in the deepest and darkest kind of loneliness, and a hand knocked on the window of our car and pointed to the map on my wife's lap. His finger traced its way from his city to our city, while our eyes followed faithfully. I have always been grateful for the knowledge others have in their possession. And finally, mutability. Sometimes I sprinkle salt on a peach or a plum, and a luscious sweetness attaches itself to the flesh of the fruit, and all the sourness of what I had begun to ingest disappears. Every once in a while, I'm a little bit lazy, and what I do is I take the flyleaf of whatever book I have in my hand, and I know you can't see this, but it's scribbled, it's a journal, it's poetry. And what I've done is I've made, as you can see in the black parts here, the darker parts, is I've written notes for a poem. And what I do is then I come home and I take that book instead of my notebook and I transcribe it to the computer, and it goes from version to version to version. Sometimes what happens is I think the poem is finished and I send it off, And lo and behold, because I have an old computer, I think, or my fingers are working faster than my mind, or the reverse, uh, a letter is missing. And so I take it that flaw is what gets the poem sent back to me. So I read more and more carefully before I send something out. And even when the poem gets accepted, uh, I think I am still suspicious. I'm curious as to what made that editor like that poem, even though when I was teaching, I'd say that you had to have some kind of hook on the poem to draw the editor in. Because I learned that from John Chardy many, many years ago, who told me that he got, I think, something like maybe 1,000 poems a day. And he said if the poem did not attract him by the title, he sent it back. And I thought that was really pretty hard judgment. But then I thought, what if I got 1,000 poems a day in the mail? I'd have to have some kind of rule that helped me to get through those poems by the end of the week, because I think the volume Saturday evening post came out um, monthly. And so you have, think of it, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, that's 15, that's 3,000 poems you got to get through. And you've got to try to, I read not as fast, but I read carefully. And so I tend to wait until I'm into the midst of the poem before I send it back. I think that's a little bit fairer. I'm not as grand maybe as John Chardy. So take it for what it is. I think that you have to be a little bit more careful. This comes from reading an old poetry issue, and it's issue 115, number 2. Death is a crease in time. It is forced to hesitate, stop, and hang helplessly on the precipice when we weep over hesitancy and failed accomplishment. A mosquito arrives. It is an unwelcome guest. Still, it seats itself at table and imbibes in the wealth of bread and blood, which sustains him as if he were attending a Black Baptist church on first Sunday. That's when the Baptist people, if I remember correctly, have Holy Communion. It's on the first Sunday, and there you are. Anybody have a question so far? Well, somebody told a story when I was in graduate school about a very gifted poet who worked at the SUNY at Buffalo, that State University of New York at Buffalo, but you put all those initials together and it becomes SUNY. But it wasn't SUNY because I think nature or whatever it is that guides the snow dropped all of the snow that didn't fall anywhere else in Buffalo. And so my first year, the snow came down, and I remarked to somebody that was a big snow, and they said, yes, it was 7 inches of snow that clogged everything in Buffalo. The next time it snowed, which was, I think, maybe 5 days later, it added 7 more. And the next time it added 10 more. And so I began to, that's why I think that all the snow that doesn't fall anywhere else in the country falls on Buffalo. But that's my remembrance of being a graduate student. And I'm sure you have yours as well. One of the things, and I've been thinking about this, I don't know where Mr. Moloch disappeared to. Oh, I see him. There he is. Um, uh, is that I keep wanting to write an essay to all those people who don't have degrees, and I don't know why. But because my mother, as I was starting to get one honorary degree after the other, said, it doesn't matter how many degrees you get if you don't know how to treat the other people you meet. And so my mother was always at some pains to try and make me a little better and a little kinder to the people that I was going to meet, and to treat them as fairly as I wanted them to treat me. And so I think that that her faith is what took me over. It also, I think, probably saved my life in many ways, because I was born in Alabama, and it was in the 40s. I think that's right. Yeah, in the 40s. So I grew up there and it was segregated. So she said to me once, when you go downtown to pay my bills for me, and you get stopped, do whatever it is the police say, because I do not know how I am going to find you when I get the news that you are in jail, one, and I have to go and get a lawyer, two, and by that time we get to the jailhouse, three. And since you are my only child, and I'm not having any more children, I want you to pay attention to me, listen to me, and do what I tell you to do. And strangely enough, I did. I thought, well, if I'm the only one that she has, I better not cause her any more grief that she's already going to get daily from other people. And so I tried as best I could to outlive her. I guess that would be the best way to pay her back. And so I did. So people sometimes may wonder what it is that I've done or why it is that I didn't protest. I took my pen and I protest. And each book that I wrote was very much in the vein, sometimes of Dunbar and sometimes not, but it struggled to give you an experience that I had had that was genuine and that you could put your faith in. So, anyway,
Herbert,
yes, somebody.
this is
Oh,
Maluk again. Yeah,
okay.
your story reminds me of the poem "Digging"
Yes.
by Seamus Heaney.
Okay.
You know, where his grandfather and father, they were all men who dug turf,
Yes.
but he did the digging with his pen.
And yes, he did. Yes. And I remember, why do I remember meeting him? And I cannot tell you now why. Sorry, I didn't know. I thought somebody was in my house calling me Herbert. So you could tell that I'm nervous about how well this is going. But thank you, because that reminds me, and it will send me back to Seamus Heaney and to read that poem again. But I
Well,
do sorry.
I think in some way, you know, I understand you're in a position where for you to protest out in the world is a great deal more dangerous than if I were to protest.
Sure. And
But
I
there's a
have,
way in which I think there's a way in which your writing is certainly a kind of protest,
Mhm,
kind of statement,
sure,
be silenced.
it is. And I'm recording an archive with a lady named Anita Danielle Cox. And I said to her, you know that early on, between slavery and segregation, uh, there were laws which said you could not teach blacks how to read and write. And so you get Dunbar playing off in a paradoxical way and ironically using um, dialect 1, using the Bible 2, which nobody ever argues with, because it seems like, as he says, it's Holy Scripture. And so you get him attacking in some innocent way. And he says, now don't you run and tell your masters there's also preaching discontent, because I isn't. I was judging Bible people by their acts. I was handing you the scripture and I was handing you the facts. So Pharaoh believed in slavery, but the Lord, he let him see that the people he put back in, every mother's son was free. And there's others think like Pharaoh, and they call the scripture liar. But the Bible says that a servant is a worthy of his hire. And you can get round or through that, and you can get over it. For whatever place you get in, this here Bible too will fit in. So you see the Lord's intention ever since the world began was that his almighty freedom that should belong to every man. But I think it would be better if I paused again to say, children, I'm talking about our freedom in a Bible-listic way. Oh, but the Moses is a-coming, and he is coming sure and fast. We can hear his feet a trumpet, and we can hear that trumpet blast. I want to warn you people, don't you get too briggity. Don't you get to bragging about these things. You just wait and see. But when the Moses with his power comes and sets us children free, oh, we will praise our gracious master that has given us liberty. And we will shout our hallelujahs on that mighty reckoning day when we is recognized as citizens and children. Now let us pray. Oh, Miss Mary, don't you weep and mourn. I say, Miss Mary, don't you weep and mourn. A Pharaoh's army got a drowned dead. Oh, Miss Mary, don't you weep. Oh, one of these mornings and it won't be long. You look for me, children, I'll be gone. A Pharaoh's army got a drowned dead. Oh, Miss Mary, don't you weep. Well, thank you, thank you. One of the things that I was about to say is I want to read this poem, which is Black people have the sense that they, at the end of all of the struggle, they will find what it is they have been looking for. They will get the prize, that is. And what I heard was one of the colleagues at Buffalo regretting a story that one of the poets had told him, a Canadian poet. So I wrote this poem, Getting Out of the Shower, for Mac Hammond. I shall always remember the time when one of your colleagues said to me, I surrendered to the conquered eyes. It was too late to achieve. I relinquished my determined vision. It was then, at that moment, I remembered a Black man's thought from long ago. It is never too late to win the prize. No use retiring until death makes his presence known. And even then, there is one more moment, a single gesture to be made, a breath to be taken that will spur you across dignity's goal with all of your intentions intact. It is then that you realize the goal was yours all along. So I thought that one of the interesting things about this is that Black people tend never to give up, no matter how harsh the times or the situations may be. How about somebody else ask me something? We have 10 or 15 minutes, I think.
Can you share one of your contrapuntal poems?
I think so. Can tell me who asked that?
This is Sonia.
Oh, there's always somebody in the audience who wants to give me trouble. I know it's a copy here on the desk, and what I'm trying to remember is where I saw got it. This is the selected poems, and I will do number 7 because it is easier. And the way the poem works is that it works down the right side and down the left side, and then it's supposed to left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And then it goes up the right side, up the left side, left, right, from bottom to top, left, right, left, right, left, right. That's an invention that J.S. Bach did centuries ago. And he had in the choir, SATB, sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. And when I came to it early on in the 70s, I was singing at a Lutheran church, and they had once a month a Bach cantata that was free in the afternoon. And after listening to a year of cantatas, I thought, why can't you have 2 people reading opposite each other, not interrupting each other, because in Bach, none of those lines, SATB, interrupts anybody else in that choir. And so you come away with a full experience of sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses all singing their particular line without destroying either the rhythm or the melody that has been proposed by the composer J.S. Bach. So I thought I could do that. And that was arrogance. But I think sometimes you have to write with that kind of confidence that it is, you know what it is you're doing, and you understand the technique that is required to do it. So I wrote this poem, contrapuntal piece number 7, and it's dedicated to Fred Redding, and I don't know where he is these days, but he read my first 6 poems, and he said, it works every way but backwards. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good, because it got me out of the hole that I thought I had painted myself into. So I had to find a way that the subject and verb and the predicate could work not only across the board, but backwards. So you had to pick a verb in the middle or in the predicate or whatever it is. The predicate became the subject, and then the verb stayed the same, and then the original subject became the predicate. I hope that you're understanding this, but here's the way the poem works. Contrapuntal piece number 7. And do you wonder why we came to touch so close, fearing neither kiss nor embrace, hungering between 2 worlds? In those last 2 months, I found an allowance of courage to drive my image straight. And do you wonder why? In those last 2 months, we came to touch so close. I found an allowance of courage, fearing neither kiss nor embrace, to drive my image straight, hungering between two worlds. Hungering between two worlds, fearing neither kiss nor embrace. We came to touch so close, and do you wonder why? To drive my image straight, I found an allowance of courage in those last 2 months. Hungering between two worlds, to drive my image straight, fearing neither kiss nor embrace, I found an allowance of courage. We came to touch so close in those last 2 months. And do you wonder why? So that showed up in my first book along the way. I see hands coming together. Thank you kindly. I hope that this makes sense to you. But it's called Contrapuntal Piece number 5. Number 10 is for Dunbar. And the way it works is down the page, on the left side, down the page, right side, all the way for, I think maybe 7 or 8 lines. Yeah. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 12, so it's 6 and 6. 6 lines on the left side, 6 lines on the right side. The trick in this one is they both work down the page. I'm being arrogant again. When it goes up the page, I adopt the way in which the people in the East write from right to left. And they write from top to bottom, okay? So the last line in the whole poem, Contrapuntal Piece number 10, is reading this way from left to right. Drop by drop, dripping water measures time. In the East, time measures water dripping, drop by drop. So you have to read each word on the right side singularly. So I figured out how they could do that without disturbing the entire whole of the language. Does that make any sense at all? Or is it too confusing? We in the Western world, we write from left to right, word, 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 word. In the Eastern world, they write from right to left, word, 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 word. So I just put both things together. Left side, you write from word to word. Right side, you write from word to word, from bottom to top, top to bottom. So that's the only side that works word for word any way you read it. Somebody pulled the poem apart and says, you can break the poem in half. Read the bottom part first and then the top part second, and it still works. So that's my invention towards fame. It didn't work.
Is that one of your books?
Yes, my books.
Could you hold it up so we can see the cover?
Oh, okay, this is a cover and it's inscribing my name. When they told me that they wanted my selected poems,
Yeah.
thought that what poets do is they write poem after poem after poem after poem, but they are in some ways inscribing their name in our brains and in our hearts so that we will remember them, I think, more than anything else.
We have a couple of things in the chat.
Okay.
Teresa Turner has asked, would you recite Dunbar's In the Morning?
I put it here somewhere, and I will find. Yes, I will, because I now hear it in my head. And just let me make sure that what I'm saying is right. I think it is a poem about a kid who is being called by his mother to get up in the morning. I see somebody nodding their head, so that must be right. 190. And I don't often go anywhere without Dunbar, because somebody in the audience invariably asks me, and I just want to be sure that that I have it. Here we go. This is in the morning. And I used to do this because they'd say, Herbert, wake up in there. And I would take my hand and I would reach out and I would pat the floor as if my feet was ready and walking. And they would respond by saying, now, once that you are done patting the feet, let me hear your feet walking across this floor. And I would think, how did they know that? That I was patting the floor. And something said because they were kids once. And that's why they knew. It wasn't so much they were smarter than I was, but they remembered the whole of this poem. In the morning. Lias, Lias, bless the Lord. Don't you know that the day is abroad? If you don't get up here, you scamp, there is going to be trouble in this here camp. Think I want to let you sleep while I make sure boarding eat. Now that's a pretty how to do. Don't you hear me, Lias, you? Bet if I come across this floor, you won't find no time to snow. Daylight always shining in while you sleep. Why, it's a sin. Ain't the candlelight enough for you to burn up without a snuff? You go the morning too, burning up the daylight too. Lions, don't you hear me call? No, you should turn toward that wall, cause I can hear that mattress squeak. This here clock is struck off 6. Caroline, bring me them there 6. Oh, you is down, sir, you is down. March yourself and wash your face, and don't you splatter all over this here place, cause I got something else to do besides cleaning up after you. Look here, boy, I'll let you see. You shan't roll your eyes at me. Come here. Bring me that strap, boy. I'll whip you till you drop. You done felt yourself too strong, and you surely got me wrong. Now you set down that table there, and just you whimper if you dare. Cause every morning on this here place, seems like I have to lose my grace. Fold your hands and bow your head and wait until the blessing said, Lord, have mercy on us. Don't you dare to touch them rolls. You sit still. I see your street. Bless the Lord. Give us peace and joy. Amen. And that's it. One of the things you have to think about is that Dunbar's writing in dialect, but what he does is he catches the whole sensibility of that community of people who, in many ways, communicated with each other without any strain or stress at all. And you get humor, you get sadness, you get the pain, you get the joy. It's all there. And one of the things that I sadly report to you is that I think in the 40s and the 50s, when Black people came enormously educated, they did not like Dunbar and they did not want to be associated with dialect. Secondly, I think it was second rate, they thought. It meant that that they weren't educated, even though Dunbar in his day graduated from high school. He was the only Black in the class with Orville and Wilbur Wright. They were friends because they lived in the same neighborhood in those days. And they encouraged each other to learn flight. I think the Dunbar flew with words and the Wright brothers flew with machinery, but they both groups, shall we say, accomplished the task that had been given to them. And that's the story that I'd like to tell about Dunbar. We've come back a long way around the town, shall we say, to understanding a little bit more of the dialect and not being so mean-spirited, shall I say, or harsh with Dunbar, because we attribute to Twain, if you dare to think about it, the writer of a great American novel. And in that novel, we have white dialect, Black dialect, pretend English when we come to the Duke and the King. And then we have Jim, who speaks in his natural dialect. And we have Huck, who admires Jim because he treats Huck like a human being. And when Jim says, well, maybe I'll die and go to hell, it's Huck's desire to follow him and go to hell too, because this man treats him with a humanity that understands him. So it's one of those ironic things that the language in some ways causes Dunbar a great deal of trial and tribulation. On the other hand, it has been a godsend for me to figure out how you say this word, because honestly, when you look at it, taking out the vowels and out the consonants, you have to figure out what that word is, and then you have to figure out how to say it. But we don't get upset with the Germans who speak in a kind of dialect when everybody is home. We don't get upset with the Irish who speak in a kind of Irish dialect when everybody's home. But we do with Dunbar because we think it's polite.
Yeah, we're getting several comments and questions actually in chat.
Okay.
Bud Zerm, he said that your contrapuntal poems remind him of Tahimba Jess, and I agree with him because Jess experiments so much with form.
Yes.
Could you comment on that and maybe what you're seeing as similarities?
Well, what I think translates is the rhythm, and that's the one thing that when the Africans were boarded on those ships and put into the belly of the ships, once they got here, they didn't come with anything, so they had to reinvent themselves. And they knew right away that one of the things they had was the rhythm. One of the things they had was the melodies. And they translated that into, shall we say, their walks, their stride, into everything that they did. And so we get the rappers, we get the people who understand this kind of rhythm and carrying it forward into something which has become the major sensibility of all the Black community, and the way in which one group rhythmically converses with another. And that sensibility I think something that we brought with us and we passed it along time and time again. I think that when I try remembering, when I fail at writing oompa, 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 I go back to the natural rhythms that the Blacks imported to this country. And then I can figure out iambic pentameter like everybody else, like all the people I'm seeing here.
There's a question too from Gail.
Okay.
It says, although I teach freshman composition at a small Jesuit university, I actually teach them about the civil rights movement, which I think is more important right now. And do you have any words of wisdom for her students?
I don't know if they're words of wisdom, but Black people really do believe that that they send their kids to school not to argue with the teacher, but to listen to what the teacher has to say, and to find out how they can absorb what the teacher has to say and put it into their body and soul and make it work. Because my family, my mother and father, one went to the 3rd grade and the other one went to the 6th grade, believed that education was important and that you could advance as long as you had that education, and nothing and no one could ever take it away from you once it was inside your head. Once it's there, it is there until death does you part with the rest of the world. So I think tell them that they are there and they have an opportunity to learn something and to ask questions about what it is they're learning, and to put those two things together and solidify them so that they can advance in the society. And by the way, when they get to college, they should not segregate themselves if they are going to um, a school that has both men and women. And if they come from all over, because if they're going home to another country, they are likely to become prime minister. I had a prince once in my class, and the Americans said that I didn't treat the prince well enough. And I says, no, 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 I'm not. He didn't come here because I was going to treat him because he was royalty. He came here to learn what I knew so he could take that back with him. I tell my students, pay attention to the princes and the kings and the guys who are going to be prime ministers, because they will need somebody to go before the cameras to speak for them. And if you are friends with those people, they will give you a job and you can make lots and lots of money. You don't have to let them mislead you, because you will know when they are not telling the truth. And somebody went to the FBI, the CIA it was. And I said, so long as you know that what you have to do is right, you can never let them mislead you. And he had a great career with the CIA. He didn't cause any trouble. He didn't cause me any trouble, because I told him not to let him trick you into doing that which is not to be done. And he survived it all. So tell your students there's a lot of things for them to learn, and they should absorb it from every little crack and corner that they find something interesting in, that they believe in, and that they can reproduce and earn a living with. So I went to school just to see if I couldn't be a teacher, so I wouldn't have to work so hard. Because somebody black said to me, "Why are you going out there to that white school? Come back and join us. We'll give you a mop and a broom and a bucket." And I bowed my head and I thought, oh Lord, there's gotta be something more than that for me to do in this world. And I have been at learning how to read and write ever since. So tell those kids, learn how to read and write. It's valuable.
There's a question too. Speaking of curiosity, someone, Michael Kozebek, wants to know about the green stole around your neck.
Aha. This is a kente cloth, and it was given to me in Detroit when I gave a reading at the Detroit African American Museum. And I had one that had been made on a machine, and some lady in the audience said, my mother-in-law weaves them, and I am going to go home and get one and bring it back to you tomorrow when we have class. And I said, well, if you do, I will wear it at every reading I have from that point on. And so that's interesting. It is a genuine kente cloth. And I said to my daughter, when I'm dead and gone, and you have me in the coffin, and just before the undertaker closes the lid, reach in and grab it, because it's the only thing that's worth anything that I have. So I want her at the end, just before they shut me in that little dark place, to reach in and grab the one thing that she can sell and probably get a ton of money for.
And maybe one final question, unless somebody has something burning, but a burning question. But Fred Zerm has asked a question which I think is pretty interesting. He says, is it just serendipity that you ended up in Dunbar's hometown of Dayton, or was that part of your plan?
Wasn't part of my plan. I was on a trip to find where I was going to go to the next university. And I went to Cincinnati. I went to somewhere in where Beloit College is. I came back and I went somewhere in Chicago. And then I flew somewhere else. And then I ended up in Dayton, Ohio. What happened was I walked into the University of Dayton, and a student was arguing with the proctor. The proctor said to him, you may not leave because I am not dismissing the class. If you walk out of here today, you will have 4 absences and I will have to dismiss you from the class without a grade. Kid responded, I don't care what you do. I am out of here. Because they were watching some kind of TV and they had watched it over and over and over again. Well, the TV wasn't very interesting. And so I couldn't blame the kid from walking out. But I said to myself, okay, so you know this is not the university that you should come to. So I put that in my book. Well, I get home and I am exhausted. And my best friend, who was white, said, go in your house and get some sleep. I will come back and we'll both go to dinner later. And he did. And he said, I've never seen you that tired. I said, well, I don't know. I tried my darndest to do the best I can, but I am exhausted because I went from, God knows, east to west, north to south. So he said, where are you going? And I said, I don't know where I'm going. Let's pull out the map. And I'm going to close my eyes. And I went ding, 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 boom. And guess where the finger landed. It landed on Dayton, Ohio, just by chance. And I get here and I walk into the same building where the English department was. And I breathe in like that, and it says, "This was the one you weren't supposed to come to."
And here you are. Oh,
And
okay.
here I am. And then, of course, and 2 years later, Margaret Walker came and she read Dunbar like nobody had ever read Dunbar. And that was it. And my mother said, because I was going to leave after 3 years for the Jews, 3 years for the Catholics, 3 years for the Protestants, 3 years for the non-believers. Then I could do whatever it is I wanted because I had helped out every group that I could think of, and I had done it willingly. And my mother said, "Stop it. Why what are you doing there?" I said, "I'm going 3 years here, 3 years there, 3 years here, 3 years there." She said, "Why are you doing that? Do they like you there?" "Yes." She said, "Do they let you teach what you want?" "Yes." "Do they pay you? Do they give you raises?" "Yes." She said, "Stay where you are. You have a job, and that's what you have to do. Stay right where you are. No more of this changing around just because you want to flit from flame to flame to flame." And so I stayed there because I suddenly understood that in my mother's day, if you got a job, because she was working in the Depression, you stayed there for life. That was it. That was your job. And they gave you money, you gave them service. So I didn't vacillate anymore. I stayed there. I would like to do, because my mother says I should leave you smiling. I would like to read you one little poem, and it's called The Warning. The old grandmother recounted in a severe voice. "My great granddaughter danced with the devil. I said, 'Gal, don't you do that. It ain't right.' But she did it anyway. And then here she comes crying like the foolish child she was. I said, 'What are you crying for? Now you are all spent and ain't going to be worth 2 cents to anyone the rest of your natural born life. You made this mess and now you have to clean it up or sleep in it. Those are your choices. You see, I have lived long enough to see the Austrians do the same thing, and they called it the waltz. I saw the gypsies all over Europe do it, and they called it the tarantella. People all over the world take chances, but you've got to know what the hell you're doing. I saw the free slaves mix it up with the devil, and they called it the boogie woogie. And I have seen all sorts of people dancing with the devil. And I know for a fact it don't pay no wages. It don't bring you no lasting glory, because I have lived my share of life on this earth. And it is expensive and costly act, and to dance with the devil. And mind you now, you spend a lifetime paying on just the interest, and nobody ever tells you that it is the principle that you've got to get down as well. Look at how famous Michael became dancing his moonwalk, and all those mannish little black and white boys followed him like he was the Pied Piper of Hamelin, doing what they call break dancing. I know all of this for a clear fact, for you see, I am an old timer, a seer who has spent some quality time dancing with the devil. So I know what it is that I am talking about. If you see my mother, oh yes, I say tell her for me, oh well, oh yes, for to meet me tomorrow in Galilee. I wanna go to heaven in the morning. So then I ride on, Jesus, ride on, my Jesus, ride on, conquering King. I wanna go to heaven in the morning. If you see John the Baptist, well, tell him for me, or say to meet me tomorrow in Galilee. I wanna go to heaven in the morning. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And thank you all for being with us tonight.
And that last poem, it's called The Warning, and it is from, it's one of the ones in The Shape of Regret.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night. Good night.